They have come together to help people caught up in the war in Syria. The conscience movement is calling for the release of all women and children locked up by the regime of Bashar al-Assad. Rights groups say about 7,000 are being held in inhumane conditions in prisons. Lula Alaga spent more than 3 years in one of Assad's detention centers.
They came for my husband, but took me away instead, in front of my children. I was taken to a basement. I later found out they were from the notorious aviation intelligence branch. They told me to take off my clothes, and I was beaten and stripped when I refused. I was sometimes kept in solitary confinement, and sometimes with other women.
Aga says her husband was arrested a few days after her and died in prison after being tortured. Her family later bribed officials to get her out. She then fled to Turkey with her 4 children. She's not the only one with such a tale. Rufeda Zetoun is a 38-year-old schoolteacher and mother of 2 from Damascus. She was arrested because of her brother's political activism. She was locked up with her mother, who had been wounded in regime shelling.
We spent 2 years in prison. My mother stayed in intensive care for 15 days, and then she lost control of the lower part of her body. There were no charges against us, so they kept me as a so-called captive to use in future prisoner swaps.
Their stories have led to stronger calls to end the practice of torture.
We as South Africans, in particularly, that come from a brutal regime such that of the apartheid regime in South Africa, understand the atrocities that are being meted out, particularly on the defenseless children and women in Syria. And this is why we are here to add our voice and say enough is enough.
Delegates also said they wanted greater efforts by the international community to stop human rights violations. The atmosphere at this conference is charged. Many of the people present here have been subjected to torture by the Assad regime in Syria. They want Bashar al-Assad and his lieutenants to be held accountable. They want those still held in prison in Syria to be released immediately. And they want to make sure that it never happens again. The conference leaders say this is just a start. They are hopeful they can carry the momentum gained here into a protest rally against the detentions planned in March. That, they believe, could put greater pressure on stakeholders like Russia and the UN to help end the plight of those still locked up. Shoaib Hassan, TRT World, Istanbul.